Welcome to the podcast summary of Plymouth. Plymouth is one of those places where the past never really sits quietly in the background. Its story runs from naval power and Atlantic crossings to wartime destruction, post-war reinvention, and a modern economy still shaped by the sea. And what makes it especially interesting is the mix of pride and contradiction. This is a city with a huge maritime legacy, some genuinely world-changing moments, and some deeply uncomfortable ones too, all while it tries to define what comes next. Plymouth's identity has been tied to maritime power for centuries, really going all the way back to its roots as a Bronze Age trading port. Over time, it became a major Royal Navy center. And that still matters now, because HMMB Devonport is the largest operational naval base in Western Europe. A lot of the city's big historical moments come through that maritime role. The Pilgrim Fathers left from Plymouth in 1620. The English fleet that defeated the Spanish Armada in 1588 was based there, and American troops embarked from the city before D-Day. So when people talk about Plymouth as a naval city, that's not just branding. It's the basic shape of the place. But that story has a darker side, and it's a major one. Plymouth's maritime history also includes direct involvement in the Atlantic slave trade. Sir John Hawkins operated from the city, and one estimate from 1625 claimed that around 1,000 villagers from the surrounding area had been captured and sold in Africa. That leaves Plymouth carrying a real tension in its historical identity. The same city associated with naval heroism and national defense was also connected to slavery, privateering, and the broader machinery of empire. It's a useful reminder that port cities often gathered wealth and prestige through systems that were anything but admirable. Then the Second World War changed Plymouth physically as well as symbolically. The dockyards were the main target, but the city center took devastating damage during the Plymouth Blitz. Across 59 Luftwaffe raids, more than 3,700 houses were destroyed and over 1,000 civilians were killed. Out of that destruction came one of the most ambitious reconstruction projects in Britain. Instead of trying to restore the old urban fabric, Plymouth was redesigned by Sir Patrick Abercrombie as a low-density, dispersed modernist city. That's a huge choice, really. Once you rebuild that way, you're not just repairing a place. You're deciding how people will move through it, live in it, and imagine it for generations. Abercrombie's 1943 plan for Plymouth wasn't modest. It treated reconstruction as a chance to impose a full hierarchy of settlements, neighborhoods, roads, and civic spaces. This was planning at its most confident, maybe even its most bossy, with the assumption that a city could be rationally organized from the top down. A lot of it did get built by 1964. More than 20,000 homes had gone up, including over 13,500 permanent council homes. But these plans also have long afterlives. One proposed bypass from that era wasn't completed until the 1980s, which tells you how decisions made in the 1940s can keep echoing for decades. Plymouth's redevelopment left the city with some ongoing architectural arguments, and they're pretty lively. The Drake Circus Shopping Center won Britain's first Carbuncle Cup in 2006, after being described as already 10 years out of date before it even opened, which is a brutal review, honestly. At the same time, the threatened demolition of the 1962 Civic Center was stopped when it was listed in 2007. That turned a building once seen by some as a tired leftover into a protected symbol of what's been called heroic modernism and welfare state planning. So Plymouth ends up arguing not just about what should be preserved, but which version of its past deserves defending. Economically, Plymouth has shifted since the 1990s away from older patterns of shipbuilding, seafaring, and defense and more toward services. But defense still looms very large there. Around 12,000 people work in defense, and roughly 7,500 serve in the armed forces. Devonport is also the UK's only naval base that refits nuclear submarines, which gives Plymouth a very specific strategic importance. The Navy estimates that the dockyard generates around 10% of the city's income. So this isn't just historical identity hanging around for sentimental reasons. It's an active economic engine. What's especially interesting is how Plymouth has expanded its maritime identity beyond ships and defense into science and environmental research. The city now has one of the Southwest's biggest clusters of marine expertise, with the University of Plymouth, the Marine Biological Association, Plymouth Marine Laboratory, the National Marine Aquarium, and other specialist institutions. The work there covers ocean acidification, climate change, algae-based biofuels, wastewater treatment, and even possible skincare applications. That gives Plymouth a different relationship with the sea. It's still maritime, but now it's also about ecology, technology, and understanding how oceans are changing. The modern city also looks different socially than some people might assume from its long history of churches, chapels, and old religious buildings. In the 2021 census, Plymouth's population was 264,695. A slight majority, 51.8%, reported no religion, while 45.3% identified as Christian. So it's a notably secular place, even with all that visible religious heritage around it. At the same time, Plymouth faces economic disadvantages. In 2013, its GVA per person was 19,943 pounds, compared with a national average of 23,755 pounds. And in 2014, its unemployment rate was above both the Southwest and Great Britain averages. That's part of the story, too. For all the naval significance and institutional weight, this is still a city dealing with some hard economic realities. And Plymouth may soon get bigger in a very literal sense. Under local government reorganization, the Unitary Authority is set to expand in 2028 into what's planned as Greater Plymouth. That would bring in 13 neighboring South Hams parishes. It reflects how Plymouth already relates to rural Devon and East Cornwall as a regional center, not just a self-contained urban patch on the map. It could also shift the scale and priorities of city government, because once your boundaries change, your politics usually do too. Plymouth ends up looking like a city where the sea connects almost everything, from empire and war to science, planning, and local politics. It's proud, complicated, sometimes battered, sometimes reinvented, and still very much in motion. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.